Hello and welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show where I connect with fintech leaders to discover their secrets to success. I'm Dexter Cousins, your host and the founder of Tier 1 People, the executive search and recruitment firm that helps high-growth fintech ventures hire exceptional people. Today's guest needs no introduction, so I'm not going to give him one. It's David Brear from 11FS. David, great to have you back.
Really good to be on. It's great to see you. It's been way too long.
It has. So, a little bit of history. You were guest number 2 on the podcast.
Feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
January 2020. And so,
congratulations. That's an amazing run.
But it's always for me quite a sentimental episode to have you on, because that was really, I think, the episode 2 guest of the biggest fintech podcast in the world. Kind of, what's the saying? Riding on the shoulders of giants. So maybe if you could tell people a little bit of a reminder about 11FS and some of the great work that you do.
Yeah, for sure. So, hello, everybody. Group CEO at 11FS, and actually Group CEO at 11FS Holdings, that I can tell you about a little bit more as well. We're up to some interesting things on that. Over the last, like I say, nearly 10 years, we have built 12 banks all around the world, which is super cool. Places like Metal with NatWest, Mox with Standard Chartered over in Hong Kong, all over the world, like Singapore, Saudi Arabia, all sorts of. Literally just won the Consultancy of the Year award against Accenture and Deloitte and all of the big boys. Not really sure how we won it. I can talk about that more later as we get into it, just given the relative sizes of our organizations. But and we have a lot of fun. We're a big believer. Our mantra is digital banking is only 1% finished. And I'll be honest, 10 years in, still only 1% finished. That's never really a dig at what people have done. It's more of a aspiration of where the industry can really get to if we do it differently. And most of what we do is about working with people to get them to understand how to do it differently. I think if you look at the things that we've built, the reason that they are sustainable is the culture, the environment, the operations that they're built around. If you get the core of anything right, you have a tendency to go really well. So we're quite straightforward people. We don't use acronyms or crazy things. It's about breaking it down and having fun while we do it as well.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of talk, I guess, particularly in this last couple of years since we were last on the show, about how AI is going to make the consultancy irrelevant. Or what have you seen in your business over this last couple of years, and how much do you buy into that kind of thought process?
Yeah, I mean, I think the consultancy industry is in trouble. Like, I really do, because I think, and that's a good thing from our perspective. Like, actually, we try and not, like, almost getting the Consultancy of the Year award was slightly sort of like insulting from our perspective, because we don't want to use the word consultant, if that makes sense, because actually all that conjures for you is paying somebody to look at your watch to tell you the time, right? We're not big PowerPoint people. Like, actually we'll provide evidence where you need evidence, but for us it's getting to the heart of the things that actually you really need to understand as an organization. So customer insight isn't going away, and actually being in a situation where you truly understand what the consumers need to do, and then actually the organizations that are still doing agile while holding a book about agile, actually getting them to really understand what a modern day operating model looks like. That's pretty much critical. So I think big consultancies, are definitely in trouble, because the idea of deploying an army against a problem, I think when actually you've got all of the intelligence that you need. And to be honest, I think it's actually a good thing. We always say to our clients, it's like, don't outsource your intelligence. Like, actually, what you want to be doing is using tooling to make yourselves intelligent, because that's where you're making great decisions. You're not paying other people to do them for you. So, I think there's a definite change in the industry, but for us, that's a good thing.
So, every podcast episode that I do, and there's like over 500 now, I think, I learn something, or I'm challenged, or my thinking about something changes. And I remember the first podcast that we did together, or where my thinking was changed, was around your approach to growing 11FS, where the kind of, I think it is still really good advice is to focus on the one thing, but you didn't. You guys focused on about 5 different things. How's that over this last 10 years worked for the evolution of the business? And if you were looking back at that, would you do it differently?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely challenging, and it's challenging because essentially it's really hard to do one thing really well. So actually, if you're attempting to do 10, then actually that's really tough, and actually we're a media business, and we're a product business, and we're a technology platform, and we're a consulting business, and we're all
Yeah.
of these different things, so, but I don't know, I've always had that tendency, which is, I'm starting to make myself sound slightly like I'm, I've got attention deficit disorder, but it's more that actually I find you and our CTO always says it's like software is best done at speed. I work best at speed. Like actually, it's like pedaling a bike. Do you know what I mean? If you
Yeah.
try and do it slowly, it's quite hard. If you do it really
Yeah.
quickly, you get momentum. I'm definitely best at speed, which means actually being really, really busy is my happy place. So yeah, it's not for everybody. And actually, I mean, the complexities over the last 10 years has really been adding more and more, businesses and adding more and more things to it. So, and today we're, goodness, I can talk about it a little bit, but we're requiring, 5 or 6 entities in different geographies to do something with them. And that's exciting, but it's pretty complicated as well,
Yeah.
so getting that right is difficult. But I think what's the key to that is people, quite frankly, and actually, if I'm honest with you, giving people a framework of behaviors you expect people to do. It's like your kids, we were talking about this before we started recording. It's like, actually, with your kids, you want to give them a framework of behavior. You don't want to have to be there to tell them off every
Yeah.
time, because when they leave the house, it stops working, right?
Yeah.
Actually, if you've instilled a belief system into them, then actually they operate in the way in which you want them to operate, whether you're there or not, right? For business, for me, it's we're massive believers. I really, really believe in macro management. Like really, really believe in it. But it takes the right type of person to work in that environment,
Yeah.
because if you're used to, somebody telling you what to do, rather than asking sort of how they can help, then it's very hard for people. And really, I mean, over the 10 years, that's been probably the biggest learning, is actually there's such a spread of how people operate.
Yeah.
And the people you think would be, brilliant in macro management are really bad at it, and vice versa, So for me, would I change anything? No, because actually it's been a hell of a ride, and really enjoyed the outcomes of where we've got to, and excited about what the future kind of looks like. But it doesn't mean it's been easy, for sure.
Yeah. So that kind of original hypothesis, that North Star of, digital banking is only 1% finished. How has that, or how has your thinking kind of evolved over this last nine and a bit years? And what are the opportunities that you're now more focused on than you were, say, perhaps 5 years back, or back in 2016 when you
Yeah.
started?
Well, we've been pretty lucky. I mean, and we say sort of pretty lucky. I mean, weirdly, I mean, if you break down a lot of the things that we've actually talked about for 10 years, they predominantly come off like 3 or 4 flights that me and Jason Bates
Yeah.
took. Like, and actually, where we couldn't do anything else, and we were like, do you know what, we've been talking around this thing, and we really need to turn it into like a diagram to explain the process, and and really, it's about taking that then and sort of almost educating people on it. It's starting to sound like a cult. I appreciate, like, it's like turned out to be some crazy religion in that structure, but really, this is about almost actually taking infinite complexity of a statement like digital banking is 1% finished, and breaking it down into a framework that people can apply to solving those problems for themselves. Weirdly, the thing that, and it's been interesting as the sort of advancements of technology have kind of come along, and there's all different hype across different bits of tech as they've come and gone, and maybe not really realized their potential or the hype. It's like people really struggle with actually the next 3 steps. It's kind of my learning. It's like people can kind of identify the problems, but they can't really identify the next 3 steps to get them out of those problems, or that they think that either their situation is so unique that actually anything that anybody else has done doesn't apply to them. So a lot of what we've ended up doing from, okay, digital banking is 1% finished, is going, okay, well, if that's a mindset, and that's a mindset of, do you know what, the world is continually changing and we've got to always be looking for opportunities, and there's new ways of solving these problems for people, then it's giving people then the kind of paint by colors version of it that actually gets them from where they want to be to where they want to, where they could be. Because when you sort of say, okay, digital banking is 1% finished, they're like, well, so what is digital banking then? And you're like, oh, okay, that's a good question. Like, what is the future? You're basically asking me. So we sort of went, to start with, we were like, well, actually, have you seen this thing, or have you seen that thing? But we started to sort of then break it down into a model. We use riches. So digital banking is real time, it's intelligent, it's contextual, it's human, it's extendable, and it's social. Not social like we're posting it to X or whatever, like more like money is a social construct. So we operate in families, in structures, in communities, in football clubs, in all of it. So money has a purpose in that way. Yeah. But when you start talking about those things, you talk about the model, you're like, okay, well, what difference would your financial services have to you if it was real time? So, if when a payment happened, it happened immediately and you saw that information, what would happen if it wasn't? Would there be worry? Would you worry that you hadn't got paid? Would you worry that you didn't know what that thing was? What about the context? Knowing that you're logging in at 5 a.m. or 2 a.m. is very different from knowing you're logging in at 3 p.m. Right? But the digital services that we offer to people are exactly the same whether they were logging in at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. Right? So what would it feel like if that service was different? If you're applying for a loan at 2 a.m., there's probably something weird going on different to when you're doing it at 2 p.m. Right? So knowing that and engaging with people differently is really, really important. The context, knowing that actually you are, I'm in Norwich versus I'm in London. Well, if I live in Norwich, then the context of what I'm looking for is probably really different than it is if I'm on the train to London.
Yeah.
So I think actually getting people to go, oh yeah, no, that makes a difference. It's actually the advantages that we give to private banking or wealth management, democratizing and using digital capability to replicate and recreate those things, and then deploying them against mass market. That's the opportunity. And once you sort of get people into that type of framework of thinking of this is where the potential actually is to service people in a very different way, you sort of find you get real momentum, but you get momentum to the next roadblock. Because almost like we talk about Conway's law a lot, where your technology is creating your operating model, and your operating model is limiting your technology, and actually figuring out how to get people to that place, which is like the tech isn't the tech for tech's sake. This isn't AI for AI's sake, or it's distributed ledgers or fancy new core banking systems or whatever. That fundamentally digital is an operating capability as much as it's an app or an outcome for your customer. That's where you really start to get people to change. Because I did a dinner in London a couple of weeks ago, and actually we had all the big banks, we had all the big fintechs, and actually we were talking about change models, and it's like one of the big challenger banks was like, it is a minimum that we deploy 100 times a day. It's a minimum. It's the minimum, and the minimum is there to enforce creativity for creating change and making change happen, and atomizing those things to understand the actual impact that they're doing. Now, if you look at any bank around the world, like that ain't happening, what I mean? But what does that do over a period of time to the DNA of your business? Like how inquisitive does that create the mindset? And actually, when you can make changes happen and undo them if they're not performing, or or even just your budgeting cycles, how does that affect your ability to plan? And do you spend a year trying to agree what to do, or do you have an idea and you test it and do it if it doesn't? Like, it's just a very different structuring. And once you get that, then you can kind of do anything.
Now, that thing about the kind of 1% finished, I think what really ties in to what you've just said as well is on the people side. And I'll give you an example, right? So let's say most searches, I'm at least assessing over 100 people. And of those 100 people, 97 will be able to tell me what the problem is. 3 will be able to go one step further and kind of, say, hey, here's a potential solution. 1 will go the extra step and under their own, kind of without being asked, put together a business plan or go and do a mystery shop or go and do, right? And so this whole thing of, the challenges and the complexity of it is the problems that we're trying to solve. 1 are complex because of all the regulatory and compliance challenges, but I think 2, they're compounded by, it's not a lack of talent. I think it's more this lack of inquisitiveness, desire, hunger to just, we talked about this before, right? Before we've hit record about you doing the mixing on your little kind of DJ console and it's all automated and it sounds great, but it's like, it's no fun because there's like, where's the challenge in actually having to learn this and overcome it? And I think this is one of the kind of big...
I've definitely found I crave things where I have to really work at it. And do you know what? Jason's really similar as well. Like, but Jason's a bit sickening though, because he'll take it to a level where he's like friggin' amazing at things. You know what I mean? Like he got obsessed with cycling at one point and was just then the god of cycling. Do you know what I mean? There was way too many pictures in spandex and whatnot. You know what I mean? But like I love that. Like you say, I bought this DJ mixing thing. Me and my kid Josh played with it for a little while. We were DJ gods. There was no skill in it. It was just pressing a few buttons and that happened, But I think I have a personality type where it's, I want to try and perfect a thing. I feel like almost like working hard is like my comfort place. You know what I mean? So weirdly, I've taken up playing darts. Weird, like, cause
there's nothing weird about it, mate. It's one of the most entertaining sports, right? That and snooker are 2 of the greatest sports I think to watch.
I mean, when there's no cheating, I mean, there's no sort of making it easier for yourself. There's no sort of easy mode, right? Bizarrely, my grandma used to be brilliant at it. Like, she was like up there ladies champion. Do you know what I mean? Like, so and we're talking about in the 70s, so but like, I remember going to my grandma's and people, like kids knocking on her door and her giving trophies away to them to get rid of these trophies because she had so many of these trophies. I've still got her darts downstairs, but me and my wife and my kids have really got into it lately. Luke Littler and Luke Humphreys and stuff, and all those great.
It's amazing entertainment. I mean, these guys are just, it's incredible what they're doing. Darts is a bit like, I think, when Stephen Hendry and then Ronnie O'Sullivan came on the scene for snooker, and that kind of just totally changed the way the game's played.
But I'm playing, I'm playing daily. Like, I'm throwing maybe like 3,000-4,000 darts a day, and really getting into it. But there's something really nice about being kind of, amateur and then improving. Do you know what I mean? And I've gone from like averaging 20 to averaging, I think my average is over 60, and I'm playing 62 it is, and I'm playing against an AI bot, and I could feel that. I feel I'm getting better, and there's something really addictive about that. And I think that's what you were saying on that quality of somebody who, for us, digital banking is 1% finished, is like, it will never be done. Like, there's never enough. There's never it's an always evolving, always improving, always greater opportunities to move these things forwards. And the people who think that way are people who will constantly be moving that, almost always dissatisfied, always looking for improvements, and that, the distinction of the group of people who fit into one and a group of people fit into 2. We don't work with the people who fit in group 2. You know what I mean? And I'd say, I know I've talked to you about this before, probably like, we could be, 20 times richer if we work with group 2. Do you know what I mean? But goodness me, it's a frustrating world that you live in if you work with group 2 people. If you work with group 1 people, actually every day is an opportunity, and that's the difference. So But I mean, back to your point around the doing so many different things, and I would still give that advice to anybody, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that, focusing on a single thing for me just is bad risk appetite. Like, actually there are things that we've tried that haven't worked and we don't do them anymore. Like, if that was the only thing we did, this company wouldn't exist, right? So, if you can continue to, find opportunities and adapt and treat everything like it's an opportunity, then, you keep moving forwards and you keep evolving. Exactly like the advice that we give to the banks, right?
So we both posted on LinkedIn recently. I wouldn't say it was a grumble. I think it was more of an observation around our respective, I guess, countries and where fintech is at, both in the UK and Australia. What's your assessment as to where the UK is right now? And would it be fair to say that they've kind of lost the crown of the, fintech center of the world?
Yeah, 100%. And it's really sad. Like, and it's sad, but almost it's kind of like they don't realize it as well.
Yeah.
And it's a strange one because, I mean, the UK is a funny place, really. I mean, we've got a track record of inventing a load of stuff and then not really productionizing it. We haven't made the most of it. Great inventions all the way back to, like, before this, I'm sure, as well. But
like
the internet,
Newcastle at one time was like the Silicon Valley of the industrial age.
Yeah.
Right?
So the things that we're great at is having good ideas, but actually we seem to have just run out of steam.
Yeah.
And I think, if I'm honest, it points to, there was a really fantastic group of individuals that actually, back to all of the things that we were just talking about, had a great mindset and were in great positions, and had, great managers who saw what that could do and sort of gave them the space to make those things happen. So within the regulators, there's people that made this happen. Within the government, there were people that made this happen.
Yeah.
And almost, I think, I think it's like anything that is successful, if you've got the wrong type of mindset, actually you sort of ossify around that success, rather than doing exactly what we've just described, which is kind of staying hungry and staying learning and keeping evolving. And unfortunately, I think fintech in the UK kind of ed itself a little bit. I think we're at a place now where a lot of the people who actually made it happen are no longer there, and actually a lot of the people that have been appointed to be there now are not really of the same caliber of the people who were there before. And the problem that brings is, all they're doing is kind of an impression of the previous people rather than actually doing it themselves. And that's a problem because, at some point somebody forgets how the secret sauce is made. And then what you find is you become a kind of a laggard rather than a leader. Don't get me wrong. There's some big things, Brexit and, COVID and all of these things that have happened that actually I think are very, very material in having an impact of the UK's destiny. But equally, we haven't made it very easy for ourselves either.
What do you think's the, if you were to rub the genie's lamp and you got 3 wishes, what would be the 3 wishes you'd make to change things in the UK?
I think UK, first and foremost, I think the passporting capability that we lost with Brexit. For anybody in the markets listening to it that don't know the UK well, then we used to, pre-Brexit, have the ability for any bank started in the UK, had the ability to passport into Europe, therefore service the entirety of Europe. Losing that, I mean, goodness, we lost 90% of the market that we could serve immediately. That's a real problem, right? Because if you're a VC looking at a slide going, tell me your TAM. If your TAM's now 10% of what it used to be, that's a real issue when it comes to investing in your organization. Therefore, I think a lot of the money, that would have come to the UK has gone elsewhere. So I think first and foremost, the passporting side of things. Secondly, and it's another impact to Brexit, is talent. Like, actually Brexit made it really clear that basically anything outside of London didn't want foreigners, in air quotes for not great on podcasts, but and that's not great, because London was such a melting pot of talented people looking to make amazing things happen. If you look at a lot of the founders of the fintechs that everybody knows and loves, they haven't got Cockney accents. You know what I mean? So, and that's a great thing. That's what we want. We want it to be a magnet globally for people to come and change an industry that wants to be changed. So I think changing that and having the ability to have much more sort of progressive approaches to visas would, I think, fundamentally transform the opportunities for the market. And then, if I'm honest with you, I think a lot of the fintechs lost steam when they started appointing people who had been at banks for 15, 20 years as well. Actually, what you found a lot of them pivot into from being that, pirates of the high seas disruptors to basically playing a small bank game. And actually, for me, you've always got to have a provocateur in the market in order to make everybody's game step up. And I think we've lost a little bit of that right now, which means, the differences between the things that some of them are doing for the customers and the others are doing for the customers is not that much different. And that's not everybody. Don't get me wrong. There are, definitely great examples in the UK market of people who are, being disruptive and trying to make changes happen. But it kind of felt like the whole industry just sort of maybe went out too quickly on the first 3 or 4 laps and lost steam when it came to the finishing line, sadly.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of comes back to what you were talking about earlier, though, and that the kind of origins of fintech were, the financial systems broken, coming out of the GFC, a lot of bad stuff went down. Kind of here in Australia, we had the Royal Commission, and that kind of we were building ahead of steam off that. And there was this real kind of sense of mission. But at the same time, there was a lot of low-hanging fruit, right? Like there were kind of some easy fixes. As that has kind of dissipated and it's been solved, now the problems become more complex, right? And the kind of way I would put it is, if we're playing a video game, right, we're getting to the boss levels now where, it's taking like hours and hours and multiple attempts to try and beat the boss rather than doing it on the first turn. Do you think there's kind of maybe a maturity challenge that we've got, which is, hey, look, this is now a real thing. It's not just about kind of pizzas and beers and we're gonna take out the banks, but it's actually now it's, hey, you got to deliver on the promise.
I guess there's 2 angles to that, really, which is I think from a bank's perspective, big incumbent organization. Actually, the cycle in the UK, everybody could have done anything that they've done in the last 10 years willingly, but it took the provocation of people breathing down the neck to make those changes happen. Monzo have come out now and they've got 12 million customers or something. I mean, it's crazy how many customers that they have managed to acquire. And actually, that pressure of whether it's a Monzo or a Chase or a Revolut or that is the people who are putting the pressure on the banks to kind of make those changes happen. I think the thing in the big banks, though, is, and actually this is the same sort of globally, I think a lot of them have sort of convinced themselves that the lower hanging fruit is the fruit. As in, we've done an app, we've got this capability, we've got some features, but not actually taking on the big problems that they've got within their organization. Like you say, they're almost going, we don't need to beat that end level boss. Let's just beat up some, NPCs along the way, and so everybody kind of has an app that looks similar, but everybody's got an operating cost that costs billions and, a core banking system that they know is coming to end of life. And, almost it's like the next guy's problem to a certain degree. I think on the fintech side of things, exactly what you said. I think actually, fintech started at all of the easy places, because actually, why would you not? Like, why would you start with the hard problems? No, let's start with payments. Let's start with retail banking. Let's start with, small end SMEs, because actually, corporate banking, private banking, wealth management, asset management, where all the money is. But it's bloody complicated. Do you know what I mean? Like, so actually you can't just, rock up with 1 year's experience and tackle those problems. Now, I think people are facing into that stuff now. But to be disruptive in something like the private banking wealth management side of things, requires, you don't do that with an e-money license and a basic app like Monzo did. You need like 6 different licenses, and you need, lots and lots of capital, and so the problems that you're solving for there are much more complex. Therefore, the time it takes to actually solve them are much more complex as well. But it doesn't mean that people are not doing it.
Yeah. And look, I think that kind of reflects really on the challenges that we've got here in Oz, right? Is that, to solve complex problems, big, bold, ambitious problems, you need a lot of capital. And it just isn't going. And if I look at, the success stories that we've got, they've all been given huge amounts of capital. But at the same time, they're really big, bold, ambitious, complex problems that when you first ask about it, you're like, are you fucking insane? There's no way you're going to be able to, right? And I think that's kind of, that's kind of where I feel we've got to as an industry. Like, the price of admission now is so much bigger than it was, kind of back in 2016.
Yeah, Ticket to Ride is pretty expensive. Therefore, getting it wrong is very expensive as well. But I mean, I think any market, and the Australian market is quite unique in the way that it's structured. And actually, I mean, if you look at really what was the tipping point in the UK for going from a couple of blue ones and a couple of red ones and a green one to having all of this sort of tapestry of retail banking was the regulators sort of push for competition. I think any market where you've got 4 or 5 players who just completely dominate and control it, and the ring fence is how hard it is to get regulation. That's always going to be a really tough market. I actually think markets that are like that, the only big hope for disruption is actually somebody who's a global player entering into a market. So, Revolut going to Australia, like it, and it's like, so you don't have to, almost they're not scared by the market because their market is actually a lot bigger than that market, if that makes sense.
And I think the challenge is that, 25 million people, it's a lot of capital for, not much reward at the end of the day, right?
Sure.
Consider, the markets that we've got, just on our doorstep: Southeast Asia, 650 million people, China, 2 billion, India, 1 billion. Africa's going to be 2 billion in the next 20 years. And
but that's where an organization that can deploy a capability that they've created for a much bigger market to a smaller market, that's where they can win. Because essentially they're not justifying it on the 25. They've already built it for the 4 billion, and actually that 4 billion deploying against another 25 million doesn't really do anything on their OpEx. So it's kind of where does the threat usually come from? It's not the people you look around the table at. It's inevitably the sort of asteroid from outer space you're not expecting, and that's where some of the big challenges can definitely come.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things I want to talk about is, I guess, kind of the emergence of the influencer in fintech. I feel like we're kind of, I don't go to events anymore because I just feel that the people that I need to be speaking to aren't at events. They're actually busy building. And, to have conversations with them, I've kind of got to take a different approach, which is, look, I think it's one of the best things about the podcast, right? Is like the conversations that allows me, enables me to have, it's like, whether it's Anthony Jenkins from 10X coming over and, catching up with him or whatever, these are just conversations that you wouldn't get access to going to an event or whatever. What's your kind of take on, I guess, and particularly with FinTech Insider and the podcast, and it's always been my go-to for insights, information, just kind of keeping up to date on what's happening on outside of the conversations that I have. What's your view on kind of where the media side of FinTech is at right now, and kind of, are we maybe bullshitting a bit too much and kind of creating the wrong impression?
Yeah. I mean, I've struggled with this, if I'm honest with you, for like, for 10 years of doing it. In fact, probably a little bit longer than that. I ran Gartner's global digital capability ahead of starting 11FS, and sort of got into social stuff then, when sort of Twitter was kind of at its peak, really. Yeah, I mean, it does seem like if you just post hashtag fintech to a lot of things, you seem to be influential in something, which is,
well, mate, the ones that get
weird.
me are the tear downs, like ripping a business to bits that you've never worked in. You don't know anybody who does work there. You've kind of accessed some information somebody's probably else has written, and then you kind of stick it in a nice chat GPT.
Give me your hot take on this.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I mean, again, it comes back to, I think there are people who do things, and then there are people who commentate on what other people do. And actually, I mean, my whole sort of thesis, and it comes back to, I mean, me and Jason spoke to Gary Vaynerchuk ages and ages ago, and I mean, I've listened to that podcast maybe like 70 times. Like he said to us very early, it's like, if you're an operator, you document versus create. And actually, that's what we do. Like, actually, we do interesting things and we document that process of doing them. So if we write about a thing, it's because we've done something about it. It's not pontification of the future of financial services. It's actually, no, this is what we think because this is what we've seen, But it's all got to be grounded in experience of doing it, And actually, I think, I mean, it goes back to your point on hiring. I mean, when you sort of pick up somebody's CV, do you denote their successes based on the blog count or the viewer count of a blog? Or do you denote the successes on the deliveries of big things in an industry? Like, I know which one I look for, because essentially that's going to be the tester of whether they have actually done the things that they think about, And don't get me wrong. I mean, like I say, working in a big company like Gartner, there's a lot of analysts there who have views, but actually those analysts are typically industry practitioners that have moved to using that knowledge to talk about the subject matter, But I think it's very, very easy. And actually, I mean, we've seen this with a few people who, you sort of get it right or you get it wrong with hiring. There's a few people where we've brought them into 11FS where you're like, okay, you don't actually want to do the thing. You just want to talk about it, and actually that is consulting. That is a consulting mindset, which is it's about, what's the saying? Aim to be interested, not interesting. If you aim to be interesting, then actually it's about you. If you aim to be interested, then actually it's about the subject matter, But it's difficult. It's a difficult thing because, I mean, you get added to these friggin' fintech, top 10 fintech champions of the world. And then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then you go look at the list. And then I spend 10 minutes writing a LinkedIn post going, I am insulted to be on this list. And if you look at number 13, that guy built a bank. Like it's the CEO of the bank of, like, number 2 just has a blog. Like, what is this? So, and then I'm like, David, it's just not worth it. Like, I just walk away from your keyboard and I'm like, cool, I've got some other stuff to do.
I find myself doing that, like writing a post and then going, no, it's cathartic, right? Like, you just have to get it out of your system and then never post it.
Well, what I find a lot, though, on these things, and it's interesting. I mean, how many of these things are pay to play as well? Because like you'll get I'll get a phone call, and I'm like, hey, you've been added to this list. Like, can you send us a headshot or whatever? And Hannah pings over, and then it comes out, and you're like, number 1 is like some random from somewhere where they paid
it always reminds
$4,000.
me that scene in The Office with David Brent where he's got the old magazine where he's being featured in it, still on his desk, and say, "Oh, what's that doing there?"
just flicking through. Yeah, exactly. It's it is a crazy world, that those things. But look, there's people making money off it, and then there's people who are creating, an illusion of themselves to a certain degree. But it's a funny one. What I've kind of learned with, and actually it was when I was joining Gartner, my manager was a guy called Rowan Taylor, and good guy. I think he works at AWS or somewhere now, doing all sorts of cool things. he asked me in the interview process, like, who's the 3 people that if you needed to do something, you would ring them right now and say, hey, like, what problems have you got, type thing. And actually, he then did it. I said somebody he knew well, he rang them and said, would you work with this person? Because we've had it a few times where somebody comes in with a big, I've done this or I've achieved this or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when you realize actually what they were is probably in the room. It sounds very Hamilton, but they were kind of in the room when it happened, rather than actually driving it forward. So, because we've had people in the organization where people are like, there is sort of zero hubris, and we won't work this. Please take this person away from us. We won't work with them. And it's like at that point you're kind of like, well, the industry might think you're a god of whatever, but your ability to actually work with people to change these things becomes really, really difficult. So
it's funny, isn't it?
Tough.
Because it is like it is, and I think fintech's a bit guilty of this. Like the crypto space is absolutely guilty of it. This thing around cult of personality, and it's almost like values and principles and behavior completely goes out of the window, and it's all based on, hey, look how much money they're making, or look at how great they are.
I wonder how much of that stuff is real. Yeah, because it comes back to, I think social media is really good for giving a the best version of yourself. You know what I mean? And actually, it's a heavily curated, heavily stylized. And actually, how much of that is actually real? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think and your point earlier on the Chat GPT blog post stuff is like, I think almost when nothing is real, nothing has any meaning. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, all of those things become almost the point of sort of marketeers breaking everything. I think, influencers break everything really, because actually it becomes, to your point, a cult rather than a capability, and that's a problem, because almost it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy rather than anything else.
Yeah.
And there's people.
We saw this with Sam Bankman-Fried, right? Like, he was treated like a god, right? And 6 months later, everybody was, oh, how could he do this to us? Yeah. And we've seen it time and time again, where it was Bernie Madoff, or we're just susceptible to kind of looking at success and not questioning, going, hang on a second, this is a real outlier. How? Right?
I think if you get close enough to those people, you realize that it doesn't work, though. And you sort of realize the fragility, because actually, again, it depends on what your priorities are, isn't it? If you're, for us building a business, if the priority is building the business, the priority is building the business. The priority is never, what does my blog look like tomorrow or whatever. I mean, like that's a side dish to the main course, essentially. But I think when you come into contact with people, though, that really are like the real deal, then actually you get such a different vibe from them, though.
Oh yeah.
Like like the Patrick at Stripe, where like when you come across him, and I weirdly, this sounds like a massive brag, and I don't mean it to be like this, is like I've come across a lot of billionaires in the last 10 years. Like consistently, they have a desire to make things happen. Like they consistently are there to achieve more things. A little bit like we were saying earlier on. It doesn't matter if it's like I'm going to hit that 180. I'm going to hit that 180. And then when they hit 180, they want to hit another 180. Like their drive to achieve something, but actually achieve the thing is just a different. It's a different level of human power. But I don't think that is ever professor like. It's never academic. It's always operational. It's always about execution, making things happen. And it's often sort of, and that's the beauty of, and you've said this before, it's beauty of having these conversations with people and doing these things, and it's kind of intoxicating. Do you know what I mean? Like you kind of get the best conversations when you come off the podcast. You're like, shit, yeah, I am ready for my day. Like, I'm going to listen to that in the shower and get hyped. I mean, it's.
I think this is the other thing, though, right? Is the the amount of people that come to me and they've started their own business and they've listened to the podcast, and like, wow, it's like an archive of what not to do and what to do. And, kind of I've actually changed, my approach to the business through listening to the podcast. And you don't realize, right, that the kind of, the data that you're building up, right, the archives, the library that you're building up, that future generations get to access for free.
That's true.
Right? Like, I mean, you think, right, when we were growing up, you'd have a school library, public library. You'd have to go and take out books, read everything. Right? Now my kids jump on YouTube, listen to podcasts. It's like it literally is like we're living the Matrix, where you just get, I'm going to upload
amazing.
Being a darts player.
It makes you worry about what is the specialism at that stage. Do you know what I mean? I went to my car had to go in for a service yesterday. Bizarrely, it was the I needed a new tire as well, and the new tire ended up costing more than the bloody service, which is super annoying. But the driving to pick it up, me and my son were in there, and he's been watching Stranger Things lately. And he was like, "Ask me any questions, I know everything," and he knew everything. Like he knew. Places, names of people, third cousin of whoever, it was like
when my son knew more about Star Wars than me, I think that was the big shock.
Yeah. Well, and I said to him, I'm like, dude, you should go on Mastermind. Like, you would kill it. That special round on Stranger Things, like, you would just smash it. And he was like, yeah, but anybody could just get that information. And I was like, oh yeah, like remembering stuff is like a niche skill now. Yeah. It's not a requirement. It's not something you need for almost anything. Actually, you probably need to be able to ask the right questions to diagnose, to do a diagnostics. But actually knowing what the answer is not really necessary in almost anything, which is kind of bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the criteria that we assess people on when we're hiring, is propensity to learn. Where do you go for information? Or growth mindset, whatever you want to call it. But it really is that hunger for, hey, how do I go and learn this? How do I take it on myself? Not what training are you going to give me? Because all of that stuff's now irrelevant, right? Like you learn it and it's irrelevant.
That's a funny, we've come across that a lot over the last 10 years. The difference between how are you going to teach me versus, hey, look at this cool thing I've figured out. And actually, the second one of those are the people who really kick on and do amazing things.
It's just intoxicating, right? To be around that.
Weirdly, the first group of because we've had that, and actually exactly like you said, it's like for anybody coming into 11FS or for anybody in the industry in any way, shape, or form, we have created the largest compendium of free content you can ever come. Learn that. Do you know what I mean? Start at episode 1. We're nearly at episode 1,000. Get yourself into, and actually, I mean, the amount of kind of research reports and things that we've given away for free, because actually, if for our whole, vision with 11FS is about changing the fabric of financial services. That's our internal. If you ask people what we do, if it aligns to changing the fabric of financial services, we do it. If it doesn't, we don't do it. Right. But our mission is just about unleashing talent. So actually, whether it's the talent in the banks, whether it's the talent in our organization, whether it's, frustrated banker who couldn't do whatever, when they put them in the right environment, we can unleash that potential. But creating all this content means actually, that's your thing. Like if you want to stay on top of the news, there's that. If you want to learn the greatest things, there's that. If you want to understand competitors, there's that. Even the products that we built that we sell to other people now, like Pulse is a benchmarking product. We built that for ourselves to make our product managers awesome. Now it's making, product managers at Amazon and, Monzo awesome as well. And it's like, that's what we do that for, So yeah, the difference between a, corporate jolly to go and learn nothing at a management retreat in Slough, versus
build a raft with your teammates.
Exactly, yeah. So, and I've never. There's only one. I got sent on a lot of when I was in, banking and insurance and stuff. You used to get sent on these kind of retreaty type things. When
Yeah.
you get to a certain level, they're like, you need to go and meet other people and, meet other people, senior people in your industry or in your organization. They were always awful, like always
Yeah.
really, really awful. And actually, I'm more of an introverted human. You know what I mean? Like, so the idea of going and spending like a week with a bunch of strangers is horrendous, like truly horrendous.
No, I want to talk about 11FS Holdings because that wasn't a thing when you were last on the podcast 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's been busy. The last 2 years have been pretty hectic all round, to be fair. But yeah, the 11FS Holdings, actually what we've done is, having built 12 things for other people over the last nearly 10 years, then actually we kind of figured it's probably time to start building some stuff for ourselves. And that basically means taking some people, taking some technology, and taking a lot of capital, and going and creating something new. So I can't go into too much detail, but what we've done is we've taken Foundry, which is the technology platform that we've built. We've put that into 11FS Holdings, and we're currently in the process of buying 4 or 5 businesses that go into that group that allow us then to really kick on and do something really interesting with it. It puts us into a different sphere, like actually, if you can't beat them, join them type mentality. Yeah. But you and Silver, Jason Bates, have moved over into that organization as well. So we've got some real good pedigree of the, founder and CPO of Monzo and the CTO of Nutmeg. So it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. But exciting times, I have to say. And it's interesting because, stepping into the, again, we first year of existence of 11FS, we were like the podcast guys, like it's like you guys off the podcast, and then we build a couple of things, and then it's like people started saying to us, it's like, why don't you just go and do it yourselves, like go and make those things happen? And I was like, yeah, we probably should do that. And then you get more opportunities and you keep doing these things. But for us, it was almost picking a problem that we have ourselves. We've all done pretty well. We've all had sort of good jobs at this or that or wherever. And actually the complexities that you start getting into when you've got, a couple of kids and a wife and a couple of dogs and a property and an investment portfolio and this and that and da-da-da-da-da, it all gets pretty complex, So actually solving for that problem is pretty good. And the reaction, I mean, we've had some great conversations. I was talking to a CEO of a bank yesterday, one of the big guys, about a problem that we're facing into with it, and people are being really, really supportive and responsive to the problems that we're facing into trying to solve some of these problems. So, but yeah, give it a couple of months, you'll start seeing announcements coming out around what we're doing. But it's super exciting. Nice to go put our our money where our mouth is, if that makes sense.
And I was going to say, are you going to take the bootstrapping approach again, as you did with
too hard? No, way too hard in this space. I mean, we've already spent way more money than we ever spent in 11FS, because essentially acquiring, regulatory licensing, acquiring, significant customer bases and different geography, like costs a lot of money to make those things happen. So, but this is a reason why you make money to spend it, right? So
but it just, I think, reflects what we talked about earlier, right? Like the price of admission has severely, risen over the last 10 years, and you've got to be solving real problems, big problems that have got a global TAM. That
100%.
If you really want to solve problems and you want to last and you want to have longevity, I think that you have to go big.
Yeah, 100%.
Fuck off, I think.
100%. You don't change the fabric of financial services by just talking about it, right? You've got to kind of go and do things and make them happen. But no, it's a fun one. And like I say, we're bumping into all sorts of weird and wonderful issues by sort of stepping on these things and trying to make them happen. But it's very exciting. It's again, it goes back to that, whether it's hitting a 180 or whether it's trying to build something really exciting. It's the journey doing it is probably as rewarding as the outcome. Once you've hit the 180, you've hit the 180. For us, I love this stuff. Do you know what I mean? And actually, if you can, the team that we've got in 11FS Holdings and the team that we've got in 11FS Group, we've just got really good human beings, you know, and actually getting to work with them to try and solve some of these problems is very exciting. It doesn't make it easy, doesn't make it not tiring, but definitely makes it a lot of fun.
Now, one thing that we've been doing on the podcast since you were last on is a little bit of a focus on health, stress, how you deal with those things. I know you had a bit of a health scare last year. What's it done? I guess, first of all, if you want to chat about it, but I guess how it's changed your approach, kind of rhythm and I guess rituals to your day now, and how you whether you've altered any things that have actually had a good impact on the business as well.
Yeah, it was a weird one. I had a bad back, and actually, I went from my back hurts a bit to being out for an hour to my back really hurts to being out for half a day to the pain was so excruciating that I was being sick, so we trundled off to A&E and my wife convinced me. I was like, look, I feel fine now, I should just get on with work, and she was like, no, you need to go and talk to somebody. So trundled up to A&E and MRI and X-ray and whatnot, and they come back and go, yeah, you got like 10 1.3 1.4 centimeter kidney stones, like we need to we're gonna have to get you in to operate. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, like that sucks, like not knowing much about kidney stones. And so when shall I come back in? And they were like, no, you need to go now, like your kidneys are both at 50%, they will fail, like if you don't solve this problem, basically. So yeah, immediately into surgery, 3 operations later, and they'd managed to get them all out. I won't go into the gory details, but they used to just like cut a hole in your back and go in via your back. They don't do that anymore because they didn't want to give anybody scars. I'll leave it to everybody's imagination of what the entry point is at this stage. Right. Not an enjoyable experience, I'll be honest with you. I have to say, of the entirety of the experience, getting the stent, the catheter out at the very end of it, while conscious, with my wife in the room and 2 nurses doing it, that was the worst part of this entire experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't the kidney stones that I had the real problem with. I managed to get septicemia, and that's not fun. So it's blood poisoning for anybody who doesn't know. And at that point they were like, you got a 1 in 4 chance of dying of this. So it was really, really dicey for 3 or 4 weeks, and the recovery's been really long. I mean, what have I learned from that is when your wife tells you to go to the hospital, basically. I know a lot of people, when they've had like near-death experiences, come back and go, I've reprioritized all of these things. And bizarrely, it gave me like a finite window. Actually, if I want to achieve the things I want to achieve, I've got a finite window of doing them. So I kind of feel like I'm working harder now than I was before. Like I say, with the starting 11FS Holdings, I've essentially taken on like 2 more jobs as well. It would be great if we were running like 8 businesses and I was getting 8 salaries. That'd be awesome. But at some point you're doing it because you love it rather than doing it because there's a multiplier effect, But so yeah, I haven't like found some change or structure. I've just realized that actually I'm not indestructible. Like actually I really thought I pretty much was indestructible. I felt like there was nothing that could stop me or touch me, or like, and actually it turns out I'm human. Like, so actually with that context, well, firstly, don't drink the water in Norfolk. Apparently it's very, 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 very lime scaly. That's what caused the kidney stones. So only filtered water for me, which makes me, for a Yorkshireman, feels really fancy. I'm not gonna lie. But and then the second part of that is work can't be infinite. Therefore, I've got to set myself milestones, and actually for me, with everything that we're doing, I've set myself a 4-year milestone of what I want to achieve by those 4 years. And then after that, we'll see what happens. But, and actually it kind of almost changes the context, because actually, whereas before work was infinite, actually it didn't matter how much I worked, there was always more work. Actually, if I want to achieve certain objectives and certain goals in the next 4 years, then actually I've got to maximize every opportunity for doing it. Don't get me wrong as well. I mean, I basically didn't talk to anybody for 5 months because I was, in bed and sick and all sorts of stuff. I was really, really unwell. Getting back into it was really weird. Like actually, for somebody who typically like talks to lots and lots of people, actually talking to people was really weird. Like actually standing up in front of a group of people to present a thing was really weird, and actually, or having been around my family, 24/7, taking a flight to go and be in a hotel room on my own for 2 nights and do a thing, and that felt really strange as well. So sort of, there's definitely things that I enjoy less now than I did before, because actually, I know where I would rather be.
Yeah. Well, mate, it's been great to have you back on. Super to see that you're back in great health as well. I was going to say you're glowing, but your shine's back on your on the
It
old
is.
bunts there. Yeah. Where can people find out more about 11FS, and where's the best place to listen to the podcast?
Yeah, so you can find us in the podcast over at 11fs.com. If you want to connect with me, just look me up on LinkedIn, David Brear.
Awesome. David, thanks so much for joining me.
No worries, Tom.
As always, folks, you can catch up with me on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're new to the show, make sure you follow us on your podcast player of choice, or hit subscribe on Fintech Chatter TV on YouTube. And if you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. It really helps me book great guests like David onto the show. Until the next episode, keep well.